Good afternoon. We are just into afternoon, everybody. I'm Karma Loveday. I chair the MEUC's Water Group. Welcome to the Water Forum. It's a slightly different structure to the ones you might have attended earlier. It's a double-length session, and it's essentially in 3 parts. So we're going to start off with 2 presentations from 2 water retailers. First of all, from SES, Business Water, who are going to talk about the outlook for pricing after 2020. And then we'll hear from Wave about water efficiency and the importance of being both a responsible business and a responsible retailer. Then we'll move into our second session, which is a kind of half an hour open discussion, Q&A. You can ask anything you like. And we'll be joined by another representative of Wave and 2 other retailers, Water Plus and Affinity for Business. And then our final session will be a presentation on contingency planning. Who supplies your water during an emergency? Who's responsible and what you need to do about that, which is obviously something that many of us don't think about until we're in a pickle. So we're hoping to kind of put it on your radar today and start the cogs turning about that particular issue. But without further ado, I will introduce our first speaker, who is Bill Clark. Bill is the Sales and Operations Director at SES Business Water, and he's going to look into his crystal ball and try to give us a flavour of where prices might go after 2020. It is a flavour only at this stage because, as Bill would explain, the methodologies are work in progress, so we can't give you chapter and verse, but hopefully this will be helpful in introducing the kind of direction of travel.
Thank you, Karma. I think it's good afternoon, everyone, now. So let me kick off with really giving you an insight as to what is you're likely to be faced by 2 key bits of consultation and events. Those events will affect you. It's really key that you understand how they're going to affect you, when, and what the impact is, and what steps you can take to mitigate those and put yourself in the best possible position. Now, as Karma's mentioned, we're talking about consultation processes and other processes like PR19, which are partway through. They are not concluded. So this is a steer in a direction of travel. Please don't come up to me in 12 months' time and say, Bill, you said this and it wasn't quite right. You know, this is the best knowledge of other people, my views, collated to give you a steer. Better than not knowing any direction of travel and not knowing what to do. So if you follow this advice, you are treading as safe a path as we can suggest for you. So that's the key. So there's 2 things going on. Many people familiar with the term PR19? Not really, okay? Price Review 19 is the regulator and wholesalers determining what's going to be happening from the year 2020, which was the next big step change in the market. So there is a significant change into how the regulator wants the wholesalers to act, and that's significant and will impact on you. We had the retail exit code at the beginning of the market, and we're in the next stage, which is consultation of the 2020 changes to the retail exit code. If you'd like to get an idea, I couldn't bring the documentations for PR19 because too many. Just to give you a flavour, that's the consultation document on the retail exit code. Wonderful reading for insomniacs. Okay? Picking the bones out of it, there's actually not much that's got real content in there. The rest of it's all positioning. So it's picking out the main elements. These 2 items, the wholesaler and their changes, which are passed through to the retailers, and the changes for the retailers come together and then from the retailer come to you as customers. So you have to recognize that a change in PR19 that affects the retailer affects you, and a change in consultation and how they act together. So it's quite intricate in that sense. Okay? So, what's the big change? PR19. I can cope in simple terms. the market is moving from a cost-up base and a profit to an efficiency-led model. A wholesaler that's inefficient won't make a profit. If you're efficient, you'll make a profit. And that's a different environment from where the market has been for decades, which has been investment and cost-led and a margin on top for profit. So that's a significant change in direction, and that will change the behaviors of the wholesalers and how they behave with the retailers and therefore the service going through. How is that going to affect investment levels when the investor can't guarantee a return, as they have been able to predominantly do in the past? So that's going to be interesting as well. So that's the main move. Emphasis on consumption and wastage, long and red meters, empty sites, leakage. Leakage also includes people using it unauthorized and not getting billed. All of those issues are coming more and more to the forefront and part of the efficiency. If you don't address those issues, you're penalized as a wholesaler. We've seen the first example. Thames Water, laudably, have decided that they will incentivize a reduction in consumption and have published that in PR19. That's fantastic news, because that's the wholesaler saying, guys, if you reduce what we're selling you, you buy less, we will actually reward you. I think that's a very positive move for the wider reasons, of which you're going to be touching on some of them in water scarcity and resource issues. So I think that's a very, very positive sign. That same company is making it extremely difficult to get data logger information to be able to effectively manage your water and manage your water reduction. So it's a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde situation where they're saying, look, we're going to be doing this, but by the way, you won't be able to measure it efficiently with a logger because we're putting in our own devices and we're going to sell you the data, but we don't know how to yet. So we're struggling with them more than any other wholesaler in the market for that issue. So I applaud them and I criticize them. I'd love that to come together and be a cohesive strategy. Then everybody benefits. If you can't monitor and measure, how can you report improvement? They want to incentivize you, give you the tools to do it. The massive change and impact on wholesalers will see a difference in behaviours, in incentives, but it will also see investment changes, and that will affect the industry. Overall, we will likely see below RPI increases in the base levels, RPI on top. So I think we'll see some reductions and some increases, and I'm not expecting significant change. But there are some areas where you are vulnerable to change, and I'm going to be detailing those. And if you fall into those categories, we'll give you some advice as to what you can do to address it. So, touched on this, this is not a decision, it's a consultation. Just like to make sure that's clear. The existing retail exit code will be superseded by these changes. So the market will change. That is going to happen. We have a flavour of direction of travel. One of that key flavours is price control, which protected customers from the open market and people taking advantage of you, is reducing. So your protection is reducing, and in certain categories, it is disappearing. So you have to protect yourself. There is a term called gross margin cap, which is now being used in these documents. We all need to be aware of and what that means. And it is a limit on what the retailer can charge over and above wholesale charges, unless you are a large user. If you're a large user, you're deemed to be capable of managing it yourself, and if you haven't switched, it assumes you will. So it's encouraging you to enter the market and switch. When I say switch, you can do a deal with your existing supplier. It's not necessarily a switch, but do the deal. Okay. So, consumption bans. There was a wide variety of consumption bans that's been simplified. By simplifying it, they've got a band in the middle which is very, very big and covers an awful lot of companies. So whilst it's simpler, it's very centric in its measurement. And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. So the first band, half a megalitre, okay, to 500 megalitres, which is really an average up to about 400 pounds of water. So that's your betting shop size, couple of staff type setup. So in that, we're expecting a retail price increase of around 1 to 2% plus RPI, plus or minus the wholesale charges change. So if wholesale charges go down by 2, RPI is 3, and retail margin goes up by 2, you're going to pay about an extra 3%. Okay? Now, that's not going to add up to an awful lot of money if you've got one betting shop. If you've got 4,000, ouch. So, next band, in the next band, it's a national margin cap of 8% on water and on 10% on sewerage. Why the margin on sewerage for the retailer is allowed to be larger than the margin on water? The work is on water because that's the water meter that we read. There's no sewerage meters to read. Sewerage is a calculation from the water consumption. So I'm not quite sure what the motivation is there, and the more intelligent people that I talk to about this, the people that know a lot more about me, can't get that yet. So there's some thinking behind it to emerge. But why a retailer should make more margin on sewerage, maybe somebody will know this and be able to answer it in the questions later. Now, if you're using 50 megalitres or more, you're deemed to be a large user. If you are a large user, they're taking away the price controls. Your retailer can charge you what they want. Now, they have to be fair in what they approach and equitable with other people, and I'll touch on that. But basically, the controls have to reflect cost reflectivity. So you're into an argument and a discussion. I'm applying that. I'm not making a profit. I want to make a profit. I'm charging you more. So if you're not in a contract and not paying wholesale or wholesale plus, you are open to your retailer choosing how much you're going to charge you. So you need to take action if you're in that sector. So small single sites, 1 to 2%, likely extra cost. Low benefit in switching because you're really talking about a cost of £20 or less on your bill. It's not going to change behaviours if you've got one-off. If you've got a small site and you've got lots of them, 1 to 2% on your bill, and you've got 4,000 betting shops, is 80 grand a year extra cost, extra overhead. So those people need to take action. If you're a medium site, the impact of the margin cap opens up, whether you call it an opportunity for the retailer or a cost risk for you as the customer, it opens up areas in that way. Will the additional cost of a single site create more switching? Not likely, but multi-site, yes. Medium multi-site, because of the banding, that covers retailers, pubs, restaurants, hotels, a big, big usage sector with a big purchase value. Costs will increase in that sector. If you're tied to retail and minus, your costs will go up. If you're on default, your costs will go up. If you're attached, contracted to wholesale with an agreed margin on top, you are protected. So if you're not protected, that's the protection to take. Large single site, your retailer can decide your default. So over 2 or 3 years, they could increase it by more than inflation, and you're paying more than you need to do. So take steps. Multi-site, there aren't that many large and multi-site, but the combination is quite an onerous one if you are. The term is reasonable and non-discriminatory in pricing policy for the retailer. That's a good one for the lawyers to argue for and against. It's difficult for you to argue against that Because what's reasonable if the retailer's saying, I'm not making enough profit? I'm not making a profit. Non-discriminatory, I've applied it to everybody. You're suffering. So I take steps to protect yourself. It's, avoid getting into the argument about you put my price up. Have you acted reasonably? Have you acted in a non-discriminatory way? That's a losing argument, isn't it? Having an argument is losing. So, small single site, switch to get a better water and wastewater. I think anybody who's still got water and wastewater with separate suppliers, why? It's unnecessary. You're processing 2 bills, 2 payments, just bring it together. If you're unhappy with the service, switch. Or if, as happens in part of the country, you're asked to pay in advance by 6 or 12 months, then switch. The apathy of water in the industry, the majority of people who've been asked to pay in advance for their water for the first time in living history are paying in advance because they can't be bothered to switch. Most people have just taken it on the chin and thought, I'll just pay them. I think large organisations have treated it differently, but a lot of medium and small have just gone in line, which is a pity. Small usage multi-site, switch and go to a wholesale plus contract. Medium usage, single site, not a lot in it. Medium usage, multi-site, big issue, switch, go wholesale plus. When I say go, I'm not doing a pitch here for anything other than pick a retailer and go wholesale plus. Pick the right retailer for you. I'm not trying to sell you what we do. I'm trying to advise you on what you should do generically, because I think that's more important in that sense. If you're a large user, single site, or large user, multi-site, you are losing your protection. Protect yourself. Straightforward. So, thank you very much for your time. The health warning is, this is a direction of travel. It's what we see coming. It's not hard fact. The only thing I can say that's categoric is, if you are on a retail minus contract, go on a wholesale plus contract. And whilst there was debate about that 2 years ago, what's best, there isn't a debate about it today. There is just an acceptance that that is the best route. Tie yourself to the lowest level, not the highest level, and watch that change. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to some questions a little bit later in the panel.
Thank you very much, Bill. So as Bill says, there's quite a lot to take in there. I'm aware of that. If you could just kind of hold fire for a moment, and we'll have our second presentation. So if I can introduce Glenn Smith. He's the Sales and Marketing Director at Wave, and he's going to talk about a very different, sort of a very high-level issue that was very thought-provoking yesterday. So I hope you enjoy the presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to the MEUC for giving us the opportunity to be here today. I want to talk to you about something that I'm really passionate about. Hopefully, I'll get you guys to see something different about water today. I want to try and provoke you a little bit to perhaps go away from here viewing and valuing water a little bit differently. It's something I'm very passionate about, and it's something at Wave that we're very passionate about to help our customers reduce their water consumption. I want to start off with a story of when I was an account manager for a water wholesaler. And the first thing I used to do to try and get to understand my customers and their needs, I used to ask for a site tour. And I would go around various different premises. I've seen some great things over the years, and I've seen some terrible things over the years. This particular company produced ready meals for the supermarkets, and as part of their process, there was lots of food spillages onto the ground. And what they did with that food, they took a big bore hose, not too dissimilar to a lot bigger than the garden hose, not too dissimilar to a fireman's hose, and they washed that product down the drain. And that was their cleanup regime. So they were accepting spilling stuff on the floor and just washing it down the drain. And water, in the past, hasn't been sexy enough to get attention in the boardroom. It's just, on its own, it just doesn't get the attention. But when you wrap water with energy and with carbon, it really can make a difference. So I put a case forward to that customer which showed them what their water, energy and carbon impact was from that process. They acted on it, they installed some jet wash guns, which was great. So I'll park that story there, because that's not the end of that story. I'm going to come back to it later on. Our planet, often referred to as the blue planet. That's because 29%, just 29% is land, and the rest is water, so 71% water. But of that vast amount of water, there is only a very small amount that is available for us to use. So 97% is too salty to drink. The fresh water in this world, it's locked up. It's in ice caps and it's in glaciers, so we can't get hold of that. So that leaves a really finite amount of water available for us as human beings, for everything that we do, industry, agriculture, just 1% of that total volume. And I want to get you to think for a minute just how fortunate we are. What do you do when you want a drink of water? Do you reach out in front of you and grab a bottle? Do you go to the kitchen? Have you got a water cooler? Do you stick your head under the tap? You know, we are very fortunate in terms of access to safe, clean drinking water. Unfortunately, that's not the same for everybody. And now I want you to think about that image. If you had to use an old plastic bottle and you were scraping water out of a dirty, muddy puddle, water that had bugs and bacteria in it and made you sick every single day of your life, that's the reality for a lot of people. There's actually 1 in 9 people on the planet don't have access to safe, clean drinking water. And what's really sad about this statistic is that the duty of collecting water often falls to the women of the household. And that can be young adults who are no longer have the ability to make an income for their family, or young girls who are going into adulthood. They're missing school, they're not getting an education. And that picture shows the kids there as well. The kids often go along to get the water with them. So it really is terrible for lots of people. And next time you're going on your holidays, dragging your 20-kilogram suitcase along, and just think about that's what those ladies carry on their head. 20 kilograms is the average weight, and they're walking miles each day to go and collect their water with their family. And what do? Well, it's easy, isn't it? We just have to turn the tap on. And again, back to my days as an account manager, and I think there is a general perception still that water's easy. It just, to get hold of it, just falls out the sky and ends up in the tap. You know, that has been said to me in the past. Customers have said water should be cheaper because it just falls out of the sky and into the tap. But actually, you know, we've got some of the best drinking water standards in the world. We've got some of the lowest leakage levels in the world. And that comes at a cost, you know, for distribution, etc., and treatment. And when you're washing the dishes or washing your hands, think about what's going down the plug hole, because that also needs to be treated. And wastewater treatment isn't cheap either. So every litre of water you're using that ends up down the drain has to go to a treatment works. And I want to just to paint the picture about what happens when you take something for granted. Normally, if you do that, it gets taken away from you at some point if you take something for granted. That's what normally happens. And this is an extreme example I want to show you, but this is the Aral Sea, once a vast, thriving lake, fourth largest lake in the world. And this is what it looks like. I've compared it to the island of Ireland. It's roughly the same length and breadth, not too dissimilar in shape, but just to give you an idea of the scale of this thing. And this is what happened over a period of years. And this happened because of mankind's interference. So we've done this, mankind has done this. They diverted the water for industry, agriculture, and cotton farming. And the area's been now left with its own microclimate. It's a contaminated area, heavily contaminated by pesticides, dust storms, carcinogenics, and that's what it looks like today from space, something that's the size of the island of Ireland. You know, it's been devastated, as have the communities, people's lives. So it's an extreme example, but it is a real example of how not to look after water resources. You then have to look at what else is going on in the world at the moment, and there is a question: is history about to repeat itself? So the river you can see on the bottom is the River Nile, the Red Sea above it. And at the end of the River Nile, the Nile, 90% of the flow comes from Ethiopia, and that feeds the Nile Delta. So the green triangular bit at the top, that's one of the richest agricultural parts of the world. Lots of what we buy in our supermarkets comes from there. So 90% of the water coming from Ethiopia, and it comes from two rivers. So it's the Blue Nile and the White Nile, and the Blue Nile contributes 59% of the total water that goes to the Nile Delta. And this is what's happening on the Blue Nile at the moment. So this will be Africa's largest hydroelectric power plant, 7th largest hydroelectric power plant in the world. And the area behind the dam, so the top end of the picture, will be the area that is flooded. And just try to illustrate what that will look like. But that could take up to 15 years to fill up. So to do that, they'll have to restrict flows into the Nile. So 10 to 15 years is the kind of estimate. So if they restrict flows to the Nile may no longer be able to self-clean. We might see an increase in pesticides. It might affect communities, fisheries, agriculture. You can start to see the picture I'm trying to paint here with the issues around the Nile. And these examples, I've got a couple of others to go through. Those of you who have been lucky enough to go to Las Vegas, you might have visited the Hoover Dam. I don't know if you can spot the difference on that picture. You probably can on this one. So climate change, population growth. Las Vegas has now got about 660,000 people living in that city, and there's people jetting in and out, all the time. People are going there for hen do's, stag do's. It's a totally different place. They've got a large water demand, large energy demand. And that's what's happened to water resources in that area. And I think if you bought a boat in one of these beautiful marinas, you might not be so happy today. Water levels have recovered in some of these areas slightly, but California's been in its longest drought. It's had a number of droughts over a number of decades, but this is the most severe one that it's ever had. Cape Town, South Africa. The South African government announced that they were going to turn the water supply off to that city. Things had got that bad. Huge population growth. Population had grown from 1995 to recently from about 2.5 million to about 4.8 million. So a big increase. But coupled with climate change and the real dry period, they were in bother. So the supply was going to be turned off to let reservoirs and river levels recover. Thankfully, they didn't have to do it. They had some bad weather, some rain. But what was really impressive, through a communications plan with all of the city, they were able to reduce water consumption by 50%. 50% across 4.5 million people. Quite staggering. And it just shows, you've got to ask yourself the question, well, what was happening to that other 50%? It had to be wasted, didn't it? You're probably thinking, why is Glenn banging on about other parts of the world? Because here in the UK, it's always raining. We don't have a problem. But what you might not realise is, per capita, in certain parts of the UK, we've got less water available per capita than there are in parts of Egypt, Morocco, Sudan, Syria. So it's very much a global issue, but you'll see there that the UK, the red banding is known as the food production belt. The UK is very firmly in a hotspot. It's a water-stressed area. And, the predictions between now and 2040 are quite grim. Climate change is going to become more dramatic, and the UK will become more red on that particular map. And the climate change, the impact it's having, you'll have seen some of the recent floods, in the summers that we've had, Morpeth, Bodcastle, Carlisle. Because when it rains, boy, it doesn't half rain in the summer. It pours down. And the issue for the wholesalers is that they can't capture that water. It runs off the fields, it runs off hard land, straight into the rivers and out to sea. So it's water that we can't actually do anything with. So it's having an impact. That's what the UK looked like in a 4-month period. You can see the chart on the right, or the map on the right there, much browner. So the UK was very, very dry last year. It made headline news, and it wasn't just the south this time, it was everywhere. It was the whole of the UK that had an issue. Even the Lake District, traditionally one of our wettest areas. Just watch this time lapse. I'm not making this stuff up. This stuff's happened, it's real, and it's happening more frequently. In the UK, our population is growing, and it's growing at a very quick rate. 1960 to 2000, the UK population grew by 6.5 million. 2000 to 2020, 8.5 million. So those stats, 40-year period, a 6.5 million increase, versus a 20-year period, another 8.5 million increase. So the population is growing rapidly. And we can't abstract any more water. We can't get more water. We've got to do more with what we've got and use less. So hopefully that's kind of painted the picture for why we need to start using less water. There's a question mark on that slide. I don't think it's a question. We absolutely need to. On average, we are using 150 of these a day. That's what we all use in this room, 150 of these a day. Don't buy plastic bottles either. That's just a prop. I hate plastic. 7.7 billion plastic bottles sold in the UK last year alone. Not just for water, for pop and everything, but let's not use plastic. So we can make a difference. As individuals, we need to make a difference as individuals. I'll just touch on some of these stats now. 1 in 3 people still leave the tap running when they clean their teeth. 1 in 3. Now that's wasting probably about 6 litres a minute. And if you look at the adult population in the UK, 52 million, if a third are leaving the tap running, that's 17 million people leaving the tap running. NHS guidelines, brush your teeth twice a day, 2 minutes. That's 408 megalitres, enough to supply 1.1 million homes, just by everybody stopping and closing the tap off when they're cleaning their teeth. Put an end to the wasteful habits. This one here, running the hot water or running the cold water. If you run the water to an acceptable warm level and just let it go down the plug hole, on average you'll waste 3.5 litres. Worse still, in the summer, if you run it to a nice chilled level, you're going to waste about 10 litres. Just put a jug in the fridge of tap water. Tastes great, and it'd be nice and chilled. It's simple stuff like that. A customer visit. I'll not mention where I was because the practice wasn't great. I was offered a tea or coffee. First thing they did was they poured the content of the kettle down the sink, refilled the kettle, and put it on boil. Why on earth do that? And it's not just once I've seen that happen. It is a habit of people. That water in that kettle, quality would be fine, probably been boiled before, might even have some heat in it so that you use less energy to boil it up next time. So let's stop doing that and just use a bit less. I mean, for those of you who like a bath, we'll talk about that in a minute, but if you have your bath about that deep, which probably to a lot of you feels about reasonable, that's 165 litres. So you're already using above the average of what we normal people are using in the UK. That's 165 litres. Take an inch off, and you'll save about 15 litres of water, and it'll not make that much difference to your bath experience. Running the tap again. If you run the bath and then go about your business, you come back and you close the tap off and you stick your first ankle in, you think, that's a bit hot, I'm going to try, put your next one in, and then you debate whether or not you're going to dip any further. Sometimes you'll put more cold in, or worse still, you put your feet in the bath and you've put too much cold in the first place, so you wait for the hot water to heat up. Worse still, you go and boil the kettle. No, these practices are commonplace, and they really do need to stop. Taking a shower is an obvious one instead of a bath. A shower uses on average 6 to 12 litres a minute, but be careful in the shower. If you have a long shower, some modern showers can use just as much water as a bath. And for those who are Whitney Houstons or Frank Sinatras, when you're in the shower, just be that little bit quicker. Again, on the stat of 52 million adults in the UK, a YouGov poll in January showed that 49% of adults shower once a day. 6% shower twice a day. So that's the equivalent of 31.5 million showers that are going on in the UK every day. 31.5 million. That's enough to supply, if we cut 1 minute off those showers, 800,000 homes. So it's just little things that we can all do that will certainly add up. And remember that our kids, they do copy what we do. So we all need to do more by using less. We need to lead by example. And that's at home and that's in the workplace as well. If we bring people on this journey and get everyone to start viewing and valuing water differently, it does make a difference. Which brings me back, I think, to my story. So I went back to see that customer 6 months later, and I couldn't actually believe what I was seeing. So previously I mentioned food was being spilt onto the floor and it was being washed down the drain. They'd installed jet wash guns. I went back, the jet wash guns, good news, were still there, but the handles on the jet washers had been taped up, so they were permanently on. And this is a business that's producing for our supermarkets. The jet wash guns were in a traffic cone. The top had been taken off the traffic cone, and they were in the top of the traffic cone, so that the water was flooding the production hall all day long. So they'd automated their cleanup process. Nobody had to go around chasing peas down the drain anymore. So, shocking practice, it went on. If they had taken their employees on a journey of you need to do more with less, get them to buy into saving water, that probably wouldn't happen. And that's certainly what we try at Wave to do with our customers, help them, use less water, and that includes with their employees. If there's any takeaway from today, think of this image. Let's make sure we don't leave a legacy for our kids where we end up having days in the UK where they've got to turn the water supply off. Let's not leave a water shortage. That's the end of the presentation. So thank you I hope that got you thinking a little bit.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks.
Right, two very different presentations there, and we're going to open it up now for discussion and questions on anything you like. I'm going to introduce our other panellists. So closest to me is Lucy Dart. Lucy is the Chief Executive of Wave, so great to have Lucy here. Glenn's staying as well, so if you have any particular questions on Glenn's presentation, Glenn's happy to take those. In the middle, we have Kirsty Christie. Some of you may recognise her. I think she's spoken at our forums before. Kirsty is Business Development Manager at Water Plus. And on the end, we're pleased to welcome Eamon Trenner, who's the Head of Customer Engagement at Affinity for Business. So we've got 4 retailers here, hopefully 4 different perspectives and able to cover quite a lot of issues off. Now, I'm going to open it up for questions. We did have a couple of our members submit questions in advance for this session, and we dealt with a couple of those yesterday. So I'm going to kick off with a couple of the ones that have been pre-submitted, and that will hopefully give you time to gather your thoughts about anything you might like to ask. So the first one I'm going to start with is, how will the forthcoming PR19 changes affect large customers? Now, Bill, I think, has given us his perspective on that. There's quite a lot to take in there, but I think just to summarise, and you might want to correct me if I go wrong, Bill, but fundamentally I think the picture is after 2020 the wholesale prices are likely to fall. The regulators talking quite tough, and their initial assessment of wholesalers' plans has been pretty aggressive actually. So I think the wholesale element of the price is likely to fall, but the price protection for large customers in the retail element is being slackened. So Bill's advice was essentially go with wholesale plus, and then you will end up in control of the retail element and hopefully benefiting from the cheaper wholesale element. Is that a fair summary?
You've got a cheaper wholesale element plus RPI plus an increase in retail margin. So you've got that combination.
So we have to remember the inflation. But it'd be great to get some other perspectives. This is obviously a crucial area for our members, price and the outlook for price. So perhaps, Lucy, if I can start with you.
Yeah, so I can start off. So I think what we can learn from the Ofwat approach is that the I&C market's working quite well. So there has been engagement from customers. I think I wholeheartedly agree with Bill on wholesale plus being a good way to buy. I think sort of at the other end of the market, sort of at the SME end of the market, particularly at the domestic end of the market, that's where we see the protection is needed so that customers get a good deal. There's other things going on around PR19 which will help the industry. There's conversations to make the industry more efficient between retail and wholesale businesses working together better. So there's some technical solutions there in terms of our ability to communicate, but also we'll see wholesalers striving to achieve more optimization of their networks. So we'd hope to see less interruptions. I think the target's quite strong on that. And we'd also hope to see less leakage. So I think overall, kind of quite a healthy picture, providing customers check that they've got a wholesale plus deal.
Okay, so benefits for service as well as potentially price.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kirsty?
Yeah, just to add a little bit, I would say I think it will stimulate the market a little bit more. So the market opened with a bit of a rip in the road and lots of people engaging, and it's fair to say it's gone a bit flatter over the last kind of year. That's good news because it's given retailers time to kind of get their knowledge and systems and processes in place, but I think it's probably good timing now to stimulate that market a bit further and incentivise large users in particular to do something, as Bill said earlier. And congratulations to everybody who's already on a wholesale plus, because your impact will be minimal.
Okay, thank you.
I think overall actually not a lot. I don't think it will there will be a major impact. If you look at the type of fluctuations that customers might be used to in gas and electricity, we're not going to see any massive change. There's been a lot of talk, discussion, rumour about whether the regulator is going to allow greater margin, which will allow retailers to offer bigger discounts. I can't see that happening. I'm not hearing any noises around that. I think if you're a large single site customer using over 50,000 cubic metres a year, you're going to see some price reduction just because the wholesale prices are going to go down. But I don't see the level of change in the other bands will be enough to stimulate the market. So if anyone is expecting cheers and balloons in April 2020, I think they'll be a bit disappointed.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll pose one more question and then I'll come to the floor. So another member asked, lots of meters still seem not to be getting read regularly. Is there an end in sight to this? Now, this is a perennial, I think, for many of us. We've talked about this in previous sessions. Little bit of context. Mosul, the market operator, recently published some data on long unread meters to try and, I think, put a bit of a spotlight on this area. That showed 15% of meters hadn't been read in a year, 5% hadn't been read in 2 years. Now, we have talked before, I know Bill has described in detail having to get a crane to read a particular meter, so we do understand that there are genuinely difficult to read meters, but I suppose I'd like to get a sense from you of whether you think that 15% not being read in a year is likely to fall, in what time frame, and how that will feed through to more accurate bills for our members. So who'd like to start? Should we start with Eamon this time? Go the other way.
I mean, I think all retailers recognise this is a really crucial question, because the thing that comes back from customers the number one requirement from a market is regular and accurate billing, which fundamentally, for if you're a metered customer, which most customers will be, commercial customers will be, means read the meter. I think a lot of retailers, I think there are two sides of it here, really. One, retailers are responsible for reading the meter, so if you're getting a poor service around meter reading, you've got the option switch retailer. But I think, to be fair, we all know that there was a lot of poor data put into the market at the beginning, and a lot of that was around meter data. And most water companies, for a number of years, tended to have a bucket which was too difficult to read, too difficult to sort out. Those issues should have been sorted out before the market went live. There was a lot of discussion around that, but it never really got addressed. So that poor data has been put into the market. There is some good work going on between retailers and wholesalers to address that. There are some areas, I think, that just actually responsibility isn't clear, which we'll have to jointly work at. So I think it will improve, but I think getting up above 94-95% is going to be quite a challenge. I think one of the disappointments I find out of PR19 is there's no incentive on wholesalers to put in smart meters and AMR to benefit customers and overcome where meters are difficult to read and give that data to customers. So I think that's a bit of a missed opportunity from PR19.
Thank you. Who else would like to comment?
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you've said. I think 95% is probably about the best you're ever going to get it, and it's going to take time. The inherited data in the market is poor, as you've already said. There are a lot of meters out there that aren't actually there. They're in the marketplace, but when people go out and survey the premises, they don't exist. And until we get a handle on what does and doesn't exist in the market, which meters are actually in the ground, and it's going to continue. I would say at least another year's worth of kind of working through trying to find those meters and update the market. I think switching has helped a number of our customers, because when you do that kind of switch process, you're almost getting a line in the sand where someone's gone out and tried to read all your meters. And then what we're finding is customer cooperation is absolutely key here, because customers often know exactly where the meter is and can point you to it. And the market doesn't have a meter even in the system. So I think it's just a lot more slog through the data and working with customers, and for you guys to work with your retailer and try and keep good records for what's on your sites. That's a big help.
Thank you, very clear.
Yeah,
Anything to add?
I think it is improving. The picture is definitely improving. There is a difference regionally in kind of the provision of meter reading services. So some of the former wholesalers do offer a service, some don't. There's very limited number of national players, and because obviously the majority of the water meters are what we would call dumb meters, they do need somebody to actually go and read them. So it's quite a big challenge to hit the 95%. I think in one of our regions we just about do it from time to time, but it is a real challenge. And I think there are a lot that we would put in the kind of health and safety bracket, which is, it's a two-man lift for the cover, and so if you haven't planned ahead, you're not going to get the read. There's lots of things like that going on. But I would say that certainly the amount of data that we've got is improving every day. So we're getting more and more photos of locations, more and more sort of pins in GPRS type maps. So, it is improving every day, and I guess the more we work at it, the better it will get.
Thank you. Have you anything to add to that, Bill? Or?
I'd say, first of all, this is a long-standing problem. It's been there for years, hidden by the fact that you just got your water bill and nobody really looked at them and nobody measured the meter reads. The wholesaler, as was your retailer, they would decide if they were reading the meter. So it's been there for quite a long time. A lot of the descriptions as to where the meter is are 20, 30-year-old descriptions that nobody recognises today. So that's a challenge. The technology of GPS means that you or I with a standard phone or a GPS receiver on a 10-digit GPS can be within 1 metre of its location. So technology exists so that you, with your smartphone, or me, or anybody else, could find that to within 1 square metre. So we've got to adopt that types of technology so that you, the customer, we, the retailer, and the meter reading contractor doesn't have to try and figure out it's out the door 50 yards on the left past the 4th sign underneath the bush, which is some of the descriptions that we get. So I'd rather see technology pinpoint and give us an accurate position. And I don't think that's unreasonable in today's world. That's a simple answer. But it's a long-standing problem, highlighted by the retail market, highlighted by switching, and it's changed dramatically. It's in the spotlight of the regulator. Great. It's being addressed. That helps everybody. The biggest reason meters aren't read for regular customers is customer refused access. So we're always engaging with customers, feeding back which of their sites, and they're typically the same sites. We go, no, we're too busy. Come back. We're too busy. We've had customers who do that repeatedly and then complain they've got an estimated bill. Sort it out. Often difficult when you've got lots of sites to get the manager, the shift manager, the changers to understand that. And people like hotels, you go knocking on the back door, want to read your meter. It's too busy.
Okay, right, let's take a few questions and comments from the floor. All right, thanks very much. You want to start? If you could just say who you are and where you're from, that'll help the panel.
I'm Smith from Pneumatic. We fall into the large user category. It surprises me because I don't think water is that big for us. But we've got about 15 meters because we've acquired adjacent sites. And I have to say, the reading is very good. You get readings every month. Just to cheer Glenn up a bit, over the last 10 years, in relation to output, we've halved their water consumption.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Not just me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My question is, I've not heard of this Wholesale Plus before, and it's got a TM trademark on it. What's the significance of that?
It's a common law trademark. We trademarked that at the beginning of before the market opened. And as a common law trademark, anybody can do that if they want to protect a phrase. Have we been aggressive in protecting it? No, because we think it's the right thing for the market. So it's just something we did about three and a bit years ago, 3.5 years ago. And it's really because some of our team had a background in energy, and we saw the flex side of energy, and saw if we take some of the attributes of flex and apply it to the water market, you end up with transferring at cost the wholesale price and just agreeing a fee. So it's like flex, but we just called it Wholesale Plus.
We can do that with any.
Yes, yeah. We're not.
It's not restricted just to your.
We've not sort of gone and said, look, we're porter cabin. You can't call any building that's portable a porter cabin with a K. We're not doing that because we don't think that's right. We want to encourage people to get the best deal.
Yeah. The other point where that's originated from is actually the Scottish market deregulation in 2008. So retail minus was the standard way of pricing in Scotland, and when the English market opened, that's kind of followed through in the early days, but it's kind of gone away now. Wholesale plus is the normal way of pricing a national contract.
The other point I meant to mention, I've worked out since gone to the open market, we've stayed with the same company, but their costs per litre have actually gone up significantly because of playing around with the standing charges and things like that. So I'm interested in your point, because it's supposed to go up. I've already challenged it, but I haven't got an answer yet.
But from your reaction, you're on a retail minus contract.
Yes.
The wholesale prices are published. Right? Every wholesaler has to publish their wholesale prices on their website. On our website, we have a summary of every wholesaler's primary charges in one document. Because the first thing people say is, how do I check it nationally? Now, we can't replicate 70 pages times 26 wholesalers. So we take all of the important ones and just put it together in one PDF that you can download. The advantage being you or your consultancy, your bill validator, can check that if we're charging you 0.8044 per cubic metre, that is the correct wholesale charge.
We check the bills yourself, and they're
Yes.
To say we weren't to begin, but by changing the standing charges, not the water and sewage charges,
Yeah.
we've increased the overall cost per
Yes.
litre.
Standing charges are published. They're primary charges. So all of those charges are independently verifiable.
So you said there wasn't supposed to be an increase as a result of.
We've gone through a period in the current price review where RPI, plus or minus previous assumptions, have taken place. So we've seen an average of about 3.5% per annum on average. And it varies up or down depending on where you are in the country. That is changing in PR19 taking effect in April P20. That's the difference.
Just to bring anybody else want to comment on that? Just to bring you in, I think we want to make the point. I think that it's the name that you've trademarked, not the actual
Yeah.
model.
Yeah.
It's widely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The model's widely used
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
all retailers, as far as I'm aware, in the market.
Okay.
And
Okay.
your price increase that you've talked about, that might be as a result of a change of an already published tariff. It's probably not from, the actual deregulation of the market, but it's worth you checking with your current supplier.
Okay, we'll take another question. Thanks.
Just along the lines of the wholesale and additional charges type tariff, if I go out to tender for 10 different companies, and that's the model that I want them to go to, is there any way that someone can hide an additional charge or take away an additional charge without you understanding that, so that in theory if everybody came back and said it was wholesale plus 3%, understanding that everybody is offered 3%, would the cost be exactly the same with all of them if that's what was agreed? Or is there, wiggle room for people to change the goalposts a little?
Okay, let me ask Eamon, do you want to take that one?
I think there are a few things there. I think there's all the wholesale tariffs are published, but you may not choose to want to wade through all the wholesale tariffs on the various websites. I think any retailer who's upfront with their customer or the organisation where they work with, it's about making their billing easy to understand and making it clear. So your question, is it possible to hide something? It shouldn't be, because the wholesale prices are published, and if you've agreed wholesale plus 3%, that should flow through. But it's up, I think, for retailers to make sure their bills are clear, so you don't feel that you're being, you're unsure about it. I don't know if you were asking the question, will you therefore get the same unit rate across the country? I don't think that's possible because there's such a wide discrepancy in wholesale tariffs. But it should certainly be possible to get the honest answer. But I think it will depend a lot on how the bills look from your supplier.
Anyone agree with that? Yeah. Okay. Sorry,
I
Glenn.
just make a comment really about your tendering process and reviewing tenders one against another, because the margins are so thin, and you are talking about you might get wholesale plus 3% back from everybody. When you look at that pound notes that produces, don't make your decision on the retail discount. Make the decision on the service you're going to get in terms of the assistance that business will give you to cut your water consumption. Because 95% of your bill is wholesale charges typically. That's what you need to really focus on in a tender process.
Right. Briefly, yeah.
Make sure you say published wholesale prices. Then make sure that there's nothing added to it other than an agreed percentage. You have the choice of each retailer choosing how much volume based on the market information we have, or you can quote the volume based on your past. If you quote the volume, everybody's quoting on the same level, then you've got a degree of numbers you can work out. Otherwise, you'll get different volumes from different retailers, which does upset people.
Okay, in view of time, I'm going to draw a close to the Q&A with the retailers, but they are all here. They've all got stands outside, so please do go and visit them and carry on the conversation. And I'm going to introduce our final short presentation. So please welcome Sven Paris. He's the Senior Sales and Marketing Manager at Water Direct, and he's going to talk to us about business continuity and who's responsible to provide your water in an outage or emergency situation.
Cool. Thank you, Karma. Thank you, MEUC, for having me. Apologies to anybody that I left on a cliffhanger yesterday. So the subject I'm going to talk about is a little more local. Thank you, retailers, for your insights as well. It's very interesting for me. What is Water Direct? What do we do? We provide alternative water supply solutions nationwide 24/7. And that means sometimes supporting the wholesalers with household interruptions. So it's us that goes out and provides alternative water supplies to household customers. We also work in the construction sector and the industrial sectors, providing bulk water solutions for on-site processes and such like. And we also work via the retailers and directly with folks like yourselves to provide contingency planning solutions for the continuity of your water supply. And that's specifically what I'm going to talk to you guys about today. Now, this slide didn't work yesterday. This is a video. Let's see what happens. No, it didn't work. Okay. So there was a short video there, 30-second video, the message of which being that organisations like yours will routinely consider contingency planning, business continuity planning for energy, for IT, but not so much water. And why is that? Utility interruptions are widely considered a top business continuity risk. When we think utility interruptions, we normally think about power and IT, but of course water is as critical to all of our business continuity as those aspects. But it doesn't happen very often, does it? In the last year, there were over 54,000 water mains burst across the UK. This is data from Water UK. So it happens very often. It's the bread and butter of our business. We've been doing it for 23 years. Over that 12-month period, we delivered over 100 million litres of alternative supply by tanker. To give you an idea of what that looks like, that's somewhere between 4,500 and 5,000 road tanker loads. Think the size of a vehicle that delivers your heating oil at home or a petrol tanker in a petrol station. 4,500 to 5,000 of those. We also delivered 10 million litres of bottled water as an alternative supply, mostly to household customers when they have an interruption to their supply. Our experience tells us that business continuity professionals don't routinely consider water as a business continuity thing. We have the ISO accreditation 22301, some of you guys might have that as well. But when the auditors come, they don't say, tell me about your water supply contingency plan. They say, tell me about your power contingency plan, tell me about your IT, tell me about your disaster recovery as a service. That's something that we want to change, because water is as critical as power and IT. And that's the message I want you guys to take home with you today. Research also suggests that 2/3 of businesses in the UK don't have any plan for water contingency. And my own experience tells me that those that do, it's not good enough. It won't give you the sort of cover that you need. I spoke to an NHS trust once that told me their contingency plan was to go to Tesco's and buy bottled water. You can imagine there's a scenario where that just isn't fit for purpose. So, who is responsible for the planning of alternative water supplies when there's an interruption? One of the wholesaler policy documents clearly states that non-household customers, that's you guys, are expected to maintain their own business continuity plans. That seems pretty clear. That's the wholesaler policy telling you that it's your responsibility to have a business continuity plan for water. Self-supply licensees, I don't know if we've got self-supply licensees in the room, but these are the guys who have brokered a deal where they buy their water supply directly from the wholesalers, bypassing the retail model. Ofwat has an explicit criteria for the awarding of a self-supply licence that self-suppliers are also required to create emergency plans for water outages affecting their premises. Now, I haven't been party to any of those transactions, but I would like to know, what those customers are doing to demonstrate their resilience in that sense. What's required? Do you just tick a box? I don't know. But it's clearly understood at a high level by Ofwat, and it's an explicit criteria for the awarding of self-supply licences. Now, if you're a customer who has sites that are agreed as vulnerable, i.e. NHS trusts, prisons, the MOSL codes, the market operator codes, state that those sites must be treated as a priority by the wholesaler. So that gives us a certain degree of reassurance. However, you must take ownership and make sure that you have a site-specific plan for those locations that's fit for purpose. The wholesaler may provide it to you, your retailer may be able to help you with that, we can help you with that. But just don't settle for, it's okay, we're agreed as a priority, so everything's going to be okay. Make sure that you have a robust written plan in place that not only looks at what the risks and consequences of a supply interruption are, but also what are you going to do when it happens? Because even if we send you a tanker really fast, where's it going to park? What's it going to plug into? What security or access considerations are there? It's 3 o'clock on Christmas morning. How are you going to pay for it? So I'm going to give you a small handful of real examples. They're anonymised, but these are real customers, real examples that we've worked with. I mentioned the NHS already. An NHS trust, a 520-bed hospital that was off supply for 24 hours. The wholesaler wasn't able to provide the scale of response that they expected. Yes, they were treated as a priority, but the wholesaler's regulatory responsibility is to the household customers, and they have to balance that with their responsibility to provide a supply to a sensitive site. It's not necessarily that the wholesaler won't help, it's just that the scale and the speed of that response might not meet the customer's expectation, and that's why you need to have that written plan in place. Obviously, the impact is patient welfare and the potential negative PR, as well as financial implications too. And that's one of the things I'd like you guys to take away from this, is that the cost isn't only financial, there are other costs too. Another customer that we work with is a food producer. They're a national chain with a central kitchen that produces sauces. They contacted us because they were concerned that an interruption to their water supply would mean that they can't carry on producing those sauces. Obviously that impacts their restaurants, and it also impacts the product that they sell to the national supermarkets. They have SLAs with the supermarkets, so there are contract fines if they don't deliver the amount of product that they say they're going to. A financial institution in London, cool the computers with water-cooled servers. They tell us that downtime would cost them about £30,000 an hour. So, that obviously impacts their clients as well, but it's a significant financial cost. Getting a plan done is cheap, very cheap. Okay, and even if you have to call an emergency tanker and it costs you £2,500, that is still vastly favourable to £30,000 an hour of downtime. And I was listening in on the energy storage forum earlier, and we were talking about downtime costing customers £60,000 an hour. So, even though there is a cost to what I'm talking about, it is going to be favourable to that downtime. The last example is a prestige office development, again in London. They invested £12 million in landscaping Then the weather got really dry and hot, and they were told that they might have to switch off their irrigation to those gardens. So the risk to that business is the loss of that £12 million investment. So, you know, again, a significant risk. What we did for them is we put some temporary storage tanks in an underground car park, and we came periodically, we brought water from outside of the affected area and we put it in the tank so that they could carry on irrigating their gardens. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of what we do and why I really want you to think about the fact that your responsibility as a business is to manage that risk yourselves. Please arrange for a thorough, site-specific contingency plan for any of your locations that rely on continuity of water supply, particularly if any of those are vulnerable sites. Ask your wholesaler and ask your retailer what they can do to help. They might provide the service for you, they might point you in the right direction, they might put you in touch with us. But please don't accept the idea that it's somebody else's problem. Even those sensitive sites who should be treated as a priority, is that secure enough for you? You know, is that going to give you that confidence that you're not going to experience a devastating interruption to supply? Think back to the statistics, 54,000 burst water mains in the UK. It does happen. It's what we've been doing for 23 years, 24 hours a day, every day of the year. At the very least, keep the contact details of an emergency water supplier in your business continuity battle box. Other emergency water suppliers are available, but if that's something that you'd like me to help you with, please grab me after today. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to provide more detailed information on any of this as is interesting for you all. I hope you've taken something from that. It's a simple message. We focus on business continuity for power and IT, loss of critical personnel, loss of access to our locations. Why don't we place the same importance on water? I don't know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Perhaps we can just quickly ask, who here has got a water contingency plan? No? Well, okay. Kind of makes Sven's point for him. Okay, any quick questions? We are pretty much out of time. If anyone's got any quick questions for Sven, I think he... No? Okay, you can speak to him after. Is that okay?
Please talk to me afterwards, or as I say, connect with me on LinkedIn, or ask one of these guys to get in touch with me.
Yeah, I think that's the message, is to take ownership and speak to your retailer, speak to your wholesaler, speak to people like Water Direct. So,
message going through some of the other presentations, you know, the changes to the water market mean that you must take ownership and you must understand what's happening.
Brilliant.